In a very short time, Kagurabachi has proved itself in becoming one of Shonen Jump's newest big hits, selling well and captivating a wide audience in Japan and overseas. Takeru Hokazono is proving to be a mangaka that defines a generation, and this is only from his first series, his first attempt, although he has made a handful of other one-shots before Kagurabachi debuted in Weekly Shonen Jump, which is what we're going to focus on today. I often cover one-shots on my channel. It's always been fascinating to me to see how artists try to tell a story in such a short amount of space and time, and I think it helps greatly to illuminate the core strengths, ideas, and values of artists, since so much goes into these shorter works. For mangaka especially, one-shots are pivotal in their careers, acting as stepping stones, a manifestation of themselves and their creativity that take them from initial meetings with editors to their first competitions and print debuts if they're good enough. With these earlier works though, they may be months or years apart, and they're often done when an artist is in their late teens to early 20s, which is a period of dramatic change and personal development. It's not just seeing an artist get better at drawing or a writer getting better at writing, it's a snapshot of a person maturing as well. Having read a bunch of one-shots and often covering an author's body of work through videos like my X-Files series, it's always fascinating to see artists grow, but Hokazono, despite me loving Kagurabachi, isn't someone I've ever delved into yet, which is why I'm excited to read his body of work prior to Kagurabachi to see if we can spot any particular themes, ideas, or motifs that he values or likes to play around with, and possibly it could help inform us of what to expect from Kagurabachi's future as well. So without further ado, let's dive into Hokazono's first one-shot. Hokazono's debut one-shot would be Enten, initially being a submission to the 2020 Tezuka Award before debuting in 2021's spring issue of Jump Giga. This follows two orphan boys, En and Toma, training under their master to reach their limits and attain a spiritual beast, the pinnacle of power in this world. While En is a prodigy and has already attained his at a very young age, Toma struggles, and despite giving his all, his progress is stunted, which causes others to make fun of him, especially when he calls En his rival. En though does acknowledge him as his rival, and this whole one-shot for the most part focuses on their bond as rivals, with both pushing each other to improve. Halfway through though, some sinister individuals enter the frame who intend on capturing En for some experimental purpose due to him having awakened his spiritual beast but being too young to effectively utilize it. This main antagonist has a chameleon beast and can utilize invisibility, but when Toma finds his friend being taken away, he engages in a brawl which looks way above his pay grade. Fortunately, due to his strong bond with his rival, he pulls himself together and manifests his own spiritual beast, a fiery bird or phoenix, illuminating the namesake of the one-shot, Enten, or Scorching Sky. With both En and Toma using their beasts in tandem, they beat their adversary, and Toma has without a doubt proven that he is En's equal. Enten is a pretty simple one-shot, but I do like the focus on the rivalry and bond between the two characters. It isn't too frilly and keeps things straightforward, which for a first one-shot is probably for the best. The artwork is solid. I think reading, it's clear that this is someone in an early developmental stage for their art, with some panels having pretty strong pose and expression work, which was likely heavily referenced, and other panels are a bit more loose and sketchy, making parts of it feel inconsistent at times in terms of quality, which makes sense as I don't think Hokazono would have really had any assistants to help, or an editor even at this stage. Some standout elements to me are the backgrounds, which at points look pretty good. The buildings Hokazono has drawn are quite solid, and the mythical beasts as well look great. Expression-wise, I think it's very clear Hokazono took a lot of inspiration from Naruto, which is also reflected in the one-shot's two main characters looking like Naruto and Sasuke somewhat. The whole focus on rivalry makes even more sense with that in mind, with Naruto and Sasuke probably being the most iconic shonen rivals, or at least one of them. In regards to recurring ideas, the spiritual beasts remind me of Tenry's jellyfish, which forms after he ingests the Datenseki. It is a manifestation of his spirit energy, so I think the same idea is being used here. Perhaps we'll see more animal-like manifestations in the future. Another thing I want to point out is one of the antagonists is wearing similar clothing and has a similar overall vibe to the first Ponytail Hishaku member we see in Kagurabachi. It's a simple thing, but likely a visual idea that has carried over from this one-shot to Hokazono's later work. As for my personal opinion on the one-shot overall, I think it's fine, and if anything, and forgive me for being blunt here, it's pretty bland. It's functional, it has some standout drawings, and for a first one-shot I think it's good, but I expected a bit more, which I guess just shows how much Hokazono must have grown in the scant few years between this and Kagurabachi. Debuting alongside Enten in Jump Giga's 2021 spring issue, we also got the one-shot Farewell Cherry Boy. This follows an underling for the Shuhei Gumi who ends up completing his first hit on a prosecutor who has been problematic for their gang, and following this, we see his mood greatly improve and him meeting a girl called Yuri. After they have a cafe date, he naively follows her down an alley so they can go to a hotel, when we're presented with a beaten up teddy bear that asks, "Do you know of love? Do you know how cruel a human can become once that is stolen?" And then the girl proceeds to blow a hole through his head while claiming to be the real main character of the story. She was an assassin from a young age who ended up falling in love with the prosecutor who we saw in the beginning of the one-shot. Someone who made her feel normal, who illuminated her world with his ideals of justice, wanting to make the world a better place and a safer one for his new loved one. That was all taken away from her though when some police come to inform her of her beloved's hit and run death. Sensing they're lying and in pocket with the Yakuza, she instinctively kills one of them with a ballpoint pen and questions the other. Using what she learned from feigning to date the boy, she then goes and hunts down the rest of the Yakuza. We see their deaths intercut by the information the boy gives, and it's satisfying as well as very cinematic. I think the gore shown off as well is the first instance of the fallout of battle or killing we get to see in Hokazono's work, which we'd see even more of later on in Kagurabachi. The rest of the one-shot is then a massacre, ending with Yuri alone, covered in blood, remarking, "It's all the worst. This is the worst." Farewell Cherry Boy is a huge step in the right direction, having a much more engaging plot that is invigorated by a twist halfway through, turning a kind of light-hearted crime manga into a bleak tale of revenge. The artwork has stepped up a ton too, with some early parts being a bit rough like the screen tone usage on the first page, but it really feels like Hokazono is finding his footing by the time it's finished. You get some of his signature visual elements like the carnage post-fights, blood splatters everywhere, and some really emotive expressions. The whole revenge story aspect is also present in Kagurabachi, being its initial defining trait, but even here we see that taking revenge and the act of killing isn't so simple. We learn that it was committed out of a desire for justice to take back after her love had been killed, but she is left empty and alone once it's all done. It's actually really depressing, and I'm very excited to see how Chihiro's tale of revenge will turn out, as Hokazono has clearly put a lot of thought into revenge storylines. This is also the first hint of romance present in Hokazono's work really, so I'd be curious to see if it pops up elsewhere. I also think the boys' expressions in this veer away from more Naruto-styled ones to something more unique. They actually remind me of how Hakuryu was when he was first introduced. If you can't tell, I really like this one. The bold twist in the middle caught me off guard, and you could see Hokazono improve in real time here as it gets closer and closer to Kagurabachi in its ideas and thematics that he's exploring. A few months after his first couple one-shots would debut, we would see Chain in the summer 2021 issue of Jump Giga. Chain follows Kuro and Kaoru, two shinobi who are hunting down a rogue shinobi and serial murderer who has recently massacred a whole division of katana-armed police. They're briefed on this mission and head out to hunt the killer, who is surprisingly easy to find but has holed up in a food court filled with civilians. They watch and discuss that the killer likely knows that he's being hunted based on the fact that he's a shinobi, and that's when he appears right beside them, initiating combat. A battle takes place and we learn of his motivations, which are to fight due to boredom. He's searching for something stimulating, which his previous fights with the Yakuza and police haven't provided. Other shinobi might give him what he's seeking though. There's an exchange of blows, special techniques being used, and while Kuro is trashing this guy, he ends up taking a small child hostage. Worry not though, as Kuro swoops in to save the day, grabbing the kid so Kaoru can use his flame hammer technique to finish him off. Chain conceptually is a bit of a step back. It doesn't feel all that unique, but does exhibit a stronger core, I think, with its overall pace and art being solid and more visually recognizable when put side to side with Kagurabachi. It helps Kaworu look similar to Chihiro, facial elements anyway, plus Kudo looks exactly like Tafuku from Kagurabachi. As a one-shot, it's a simple battle shonen affair, the attacks are flashy, motivations are what you'd expect, though sadly I think it lacks the brutality of Cherry Boy and Kagurabachi. Katana are present for maybe the first time though, and the world building and setup, it being a modern day-ish setting with ninja abilities and swords again, is slowly building the world Kagurabachi would be set in. I'd also be remiss not to mention that this duo is very similar to Hiyuki and Tafuku. Tafuku again being quite obvious, but Kaoru and Hiyuki have similar cocky and abrasive personalities, plus a fire motif in their combat. I thought I might have more to say about this one, but as a one-shot I felt it was a bit weak, though from a developmental perspective it's cool to see things really start to come together and resemble Hokazono's later work. In 2022, Hokazono would also be part of the Jump Short Frontier in Weekly Shonen Jump issue 19 with Madogiwa de Amu, which had to abide by the theme of student life, and I think it's important to note that this one is much shorter than the others, at only 15 pages long. Here we follow Ota, a student who's being bullied at school, and the girl who sits in front of him, Yamagishi. The two exchange notes with each other, with it potentially being the only thing the two truly look forward to at school. On Yamagishi's birthday, Ota presents her with a misanga, a bracelet hand-weaved with threads that's filled with the thoughts of the one who makes it. When it's filled with the wishes of both people, it supposedly tears apart and brings the wearer power to fulfill their wishes. As they chat away, the school bullies find them in the classroom and begin to assault Ota in front of Yamagishi. Overwhelmed with feelings, the misanga snaps and in her hand lies a handgun. She shoots the bullies and then leans in to kiss Ota. Madogiwa de Amu, or Knitting by the Window, is pretty heavy. From the get-go, the bullying showcased is pretty extreme, and we get to see the physical abuse dealt to Ota through his bruises, as well as the mental and environmental through name-calling and his defaced desk. Then the shooting aspect is incredibly brutal, fast, and you can tell Ota is taken aback by this, and then his face is obscured for the kiss, possibly leading to the idea that this isn't consensual and even more twisted than you might initially think. I also think the kiss could be a representation of a violent act that isn't traditionally seen as a violent act, because if it isn't consensual, then it's an extremely abrasive act done right after a really shocking event. So there could be ideas played around here where love and violence are kind of on the same spectrum in a way. I haven't really thought about it too much, but I do think that would be an interesting angle to tackle some of the other events throughout Hokazono's one-shots, like in Sayonara Cherry Boy, just the relationship between love and violence. That might also come up in Kagurabachi later. For now, this is just kind of food for thought I've had while making this video in the aftermath, and it's a topic I think warrants discussion in a future video maybe, especially since this came up in a manga I read recently called Umiga Hoshi Endroll. It's really interesting, and I'd love to cover that at some point, but that is not a Hokazono one-shot, so we'll get back to those right now. The feelings on display throughout the middle though, the notes shared between the two and the dialogue of how they make each other's life slightly more tolerable is really nice though. The smallest actions or little doodles can make someone's day. They can save them from the brink. Hokazono's emotional expressions shine here too. So much is told through eye shapes and how they're drawn. The art overall feels very polished, and I love how scratchy it is, with hatching being used a lot here, which fits its darker tone. And the balance of white to black is strong, aiding the one-shot's pace and how easily you can read and ingest it. Violence again crops up in an unlikely place, though this time we get to see the signature bloody aftermath present in Kagurabachi, just in a different context. Romance also rears its head again, with violence being perpetrated by a character in a sort of revenge-like way, possibly due to love. But what does this mean for Ota, for the person Yamagishi loves? We never really get to see his response to the shooting or the kiss. The fallout of revenge or violence on others and loved ones I think is something we have seen with the Daruma sorcerer in Kagurabachi and will likely continue to see as the series progresses, and I feel like if this one-shot was longer, perhaps we'd explore that more here. The idea of the Misanga is great too. I love how literally Hokazono took it, taking something so innocent and full of love, and then he perverts it. The panel with the gun too is really shocking, but it makes for such a visceral short story that's very memorable. It might be my favorite of all of his one-shots. Finally, his first full one-shot in Jump, and his final one before debuting with Kagurabachi, would be Roku no Meiyaku in Shonen Jump's joint issue 36-37 in 2022. This one follows Roku chilling under the railway tracks and smoking when he's met with Lucille, a messenger from hell. Here we learn of Roku's past and his relationship with his best friend Machi, and they were incredibly close ever since being children, and both belonged to a Yakuza family, though we quickly see early on that Machi is already dead, in front of us the entire time, and he's been filled with blades and wounds. The reason being because the two disobeyed orders from their father, letting their hits go, only chopping off the arms of their targets instead of killing them, as they were innocents or children. Now with nothing really left to live for, Roku is apathetic and asks Lucille to get everything over with in taking him to hell. The thing is, that's not where he's destined for, and Lucille is actually looking for a substitute partner, offering Roku power and the guarantee he'd live for 100 years, which would help him take revenge, although the idea of living 100 years without Machi doesn't seem all that appealing for Roku. Then we get to Roku's revenge. He massacres his old clanmates, cutting a bloody path to his father, though some have already died before he's gotten there, with his father revealing that he'd already avenged Machi, stating he's sorry for his prior judgment. But this is just a ruse to bring Roku closer, and the clan head then fires a bullet into Roku's abdomen. His dying thoughts are of his best friend Machi, an old conversation, something mundane and about the idea of Roku living without Machi. Then Roku comes to accept that while a life without Machi might be painful and boring, there will still be moments worth experiencing, so he makes the deal with Lucille and enacts his revenge. Looking more like an avenging angel, he cuts down his father and the rest of the clan in a few beautiful double-page spreads, with the one-shot culminating with Roku and Lucille visiting Machi's grave. Roku's Dark Pact is another evolution in Hokazono's art, with it all having come together looking pretty similar to his current style. It's solidified in its moments of dialogue and its action scenes, with this one finally focusing heavily on katana-based usage. Revenge again is a focal point for the death of a loved one, but this time it gets a bit more of a focus and we see the aftermath of it as well, with a slightly nicer end. There is a catharsis and a willingness on Roku's part to live despite what he's lost, through revenge showing him that he's dealt with some very bad people and he could potentially keep living to help others or just to kill those who are evil. The thread of shonen friends and rivals is really strong throughout many one-shots and has gradually grown. Hokazoku clearly loves creating these intimate relationships between people that are special. Roku clearly doesn't feel like it's worth living if his friend isn't there, and it reminds me of Hakuri and Chihiro in a way. With the way they're so close in the series, a partner-like character might have been inevitable based on the one-shots. I really like Lucille in this too, since he's unlike anything else in Hokazono's body of work. I'm not sure we'll see any quirky critters like this in Kagurabachi, but perhaps in a future work. The crow-like ability and visuals though, with the devil-based stuff, is incredibly striking, and were definitely used again for Samura and the Tobimune from Kagurabachi's latest arc. I can see why he'd reuse this idea though, since it's very cool. It being used in tandem with the devil context though harkens to a more angelic place, which I think is very interesting. I wonder if something similar might be explored through Samura, as him being some kind of avenging angel like Roku. My favorite thing about this one-shot though is its general melancholic tone. I feel like Hokazono illustrates both narratively and visually someone who's gone through a great loss very well. This applies to Chihiro and Roku here. The depth of his character writing has grown so much since Enten with En and Taro. Everything has grown really. Hokazono's work just feels more his own, borrowing elements from his favorite stories and media like Naruto, John Wick, Batman, etc., and molding his own personal brand of storytelling and art with them, which is something all artists do, but seeing it happen sequentially like this is really fun and just is a testament to how creative and brilliant human beings can be when making things. His characters blend traditional shonen values with a sadness, a desire for revenge, and a want to be loved, and are more complicated and interesting for it. His art has developed more unique facial expressions, keeping the exaggeration present from his inspirations, but peppering in these evocative illustrations of eyes that convey so much sadness or warmth that tie into why his characters feel so well realized for me. Gradually seeing levels of extreme violence pop up in his work, which are sudden and visceral, exciting and shocking, and then becoming a hallmark of what he makes, likely borrowing from Western action films, these scenes just get better and better after each one-shot, but have been gripping since the very first gunshot in Cherry Boy. The road ahead for Hokazono is going to be really interesting, and with each arc of Kagurabachi, just like his one-shots, they get better and better as he develops. I feel pretty safe in his hands too, because it feels like he's wanted to explore a revenge story for a long time, and his balancing of the violence and emotion that comes from that has been explored effectively so far, but it's hard to tell what will really be at the end of Kagurabachi and what the final take on all of this violence and revenge will be. I'm surprised other ideas and themes that have been explored in Kagurabachi haven't been explored previously, since they're so tight in the manga. The idea of fatherhood is slightly touched on in Roku, but isn't really present elsewhere, yet it coats Kagurabachi being pivotal due to Kunoshige. Death of the author is another one explored throughout the Shoujo arc, which I thought might have been explored at some point in a one-shot, but perhaps it'll be explored again in a future work maybe. I'm unsure if romance will ever play a role in Kagurabachi generally, but the idea of love or being loved overall could return. I think Chihiro moving on and finding family is a distinct possibility, especially with what Roku illustrated. Revenge doesn't have to be the end, with it maybe answering Cherry Boy in a way. The loss of someone can't be filled with retaliation or violence. The loss of love can only be filled with more love. It would be nice to see Chihiro and the other characters of Kagurabachi happy anyway, so I'm hoping for some kind of cathartic happy ending for the series, or at least a more positive conclusion to Chihiro's revenge arc. And overall, those are my thoughts on Hokazono's works prior to Kagurabachi. I'll leave links to them all in the description so you can read them if you'd like, though I will say they don't all have great translations currently. They're a bit messy and the typesetting is off, or they have some broken English. And in the case of Enten, the first page is actually the second and the fourth page is actually the third, with the whole one-shot working like this, I think. It's been uploaded wrong from what I can tell, which makes it really confusing to read. Still, I'm very grateful that people have bothered to translate everything he's made, and I hope it was done out of passion and not just something done quickly for clout because Kagurabachi is popular. If you have read them, then maybe let me know what you think of Hokazono's one-shots in the comments and him overall as an artist. Which one-shot do you like the most, and what might you be looking forward to in Kagurabachi's future? If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and consider sticking around, since I make videos on all sorts of manga, usually Shonen Jump related stuff on its history or its cancelled manga. Also, if you really enjoyed the video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It helps a ton and pushes me to make better videos. You'll also get some cool rewards like access to exclusive polls, and you can listen to the Patreon-only Trend Talks podcast at any tier, where I chat about all sorts of other media and manga. And you'll also be thanked at the end of my videos, with you getting your own little doodle at the $3 tier like Kinocha, Jade, Kaizoku Gairu, Sorokul Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Fako, Yellowtail, Lay Sloggett, Chris P. Bacon, Joe Henshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Weepy Boy, Wuzzle, Balant, and Cactus. And also AB, Vako Draws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, and Jonathan Dragonet at the $1 tier. Thank you all so much for being patrons. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.